know what the case is that this is good for the United States. No one's even attempting to make that case. So instead they say, well, you hate Jews. Ben Shapiro being like, wagging his eyebrows at you and telling you you're an anti-Semite. It doesn't matter what he says. If killing an 86-year-old religious leader didn't cause a spontaneous creation of a pro-Western government, which was apparently Ted Cruz's plan, if that didn't work, what would happen? Well, China would take over. And so anyone who didn't think that through is not qualified to lead anything. I almost want to run for president just to debate Ted Cruz.
Well, why wouldn't you? Going to war is the gravest decision a leader can make. It's a decision which, by design, causes death at scale. It reduces the quality of life for your own people, at least for a while, and it inevitably unleashes chaos, both economic and political, which is inherently not within your control. That's why most leaders carefully construct a case for war based on the costs and the rewards. Amid the suffering, they see great benefit in the national interest. Could it expand our territory or our control? Does it eliminate a genuine threat, which makes our country safer? Will it make us more powerful in our own geographic neighborhood? Is it popular with our people? Does it strengthen our national unity and pride? For President Trump right now, the answer to all these questions is no. For Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who says he's dreamed of this for 40 years, it could be yes on all counts. It's therefore perfectly reasonable to believe that Israel led the US into this war in Iran, not least because Marco Rubio said it and Antony Blinken said Netanyahu tried the same strategy with the two previous presidents. But it doesn't answer the question of why President Trump went along with it and why now. The answer could simply be oil, as it's often been before. Prices are swinging wildly at the moment, but the president said this.
Prices are coming down very substantially. Oil will be coming down. That's just a matter of war. That happens you can almost predict it. I would say it went up a little bit less than we thought. It's going to come down more than anybody understands.
As it stands, Iran has only tightened its grip on the Strait of Hormuz. It's now exporting more of its own oil than before the war began, while making it more expensive for everybody else. And if the US always planned to take control, to conquer the strait and leave Israel to police it, why did nobody say that? Trump was crystal clear about the unashamedly selfish benefits of raiding Venezuela. He's made a similar case about Greenland, whether you agree with it or not. So why the muddled messaging now? It's impossible to disconnect it from the bigger picture about his final term, the defense of MAGA's legacy and the battle for its future. The so-called MAGA war was red hot long before the Iran war began. Trump will be well aware that one side is extremely skeptical about Israel because it's a direct threat to a very literal interpretation of America first. Fix this country before sending bombs to fix everybody else's. The other side would rather you didn't talk about Israel at all, as is to express unconditional support. Israel, they believe, is a key overseas territory in a new American empire which rules the world with muscle. That battle of ideas is going nowhere fast, which is why presidential hopeful Ted Cruz said this.
I believe Tucker Carlson is the single most dangerous demagogue in this country. And I'll tell you, I've made the decision that I'm going to take him on head directly.
Well, Tucker Carlson rejoins me now on Uncensored. Tucker, how are you?
It's such a serious topic, and then you play the Ted Cruz clip, and I laugh. He already took me on head-to-head last summer. I'm not running for president, so I don't know why he would be running for president against me. But thank you. And Piers, as I have said publicly a number of times, you have been, even though we disagree on a lot of core issues, you have been a champion for free speech for years, especially as free speech, the allowable window of free speech shrinks, and you've been one of the world's great champions of it. So I'm not surprised that you're getting attacked for that, but good for you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Well, we're going to come to some of those attacks a little later. Just in relation to Ted Cruz, I mean, I watched that interview that you did with him where he had no idea how many people live in Iran. And as you rightly pointed out, that ought to be probably a basic prerequisite of knowing about a country before you may wish to, for example, attack a country. And it may be that him now responding in the way that he is because you embarrassed him so much that day. But in relation to his claim that you are the single most dangerous demagogue in America, how do you respond to that?
Well, I'm honored that I beat Mamdani and AOC and the entire Democratic Party. I mean, this is a conservative Republican senator from Texas telling you that I am the most dangerous. Well, why is that? I have no allegiance to any foreign country, only my own, the one in which I was born, unlike Ted Cruz, who's from Canada. Why would I be the most dangerous? In fact, I'm not a demagogue. I don't seek to divide people. It pains me to see people divided. It's against my religion, and it's bad for my country. He's mad at me, well, yeah, because his interview didn't go well, as you said. That's true, I think. But he's actually most mad at me because I'm criticizing our alliance with Israel, and I'm not doing that because I'm getting anything out of it. I'm certainly not. Or because I hate Israel. I don't and never have. But because I don't think it helps the United States. And I've been saying that for the last year to increasing irritation from agents of Israel like Ted Cruz. And now this war kind of proves the point. Unfortunately, I wish we hadn't come to this, but this is so destructive to American national interest that it's hard to believe destroying American national interest, weakening the United States, wasn't part of the point. How could it not have been? And the last point I would make about relevant knowledge of a country you seek to overthrow is that, like, looking at maps doesn't tell you the whole story, but it tells you part of the story. And at the eastern end of the Persian Gulf is a strait called Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's energy flows, and a huge percentage of its fertilizer and sulfur and petrochemicals and things that we need for civilization. And if you shut that down, the world economy tanks. And by the way, if you take out the government that controls one half of that strait, and that government is replaced by warring tribes, a civil war, then you open it up to piracy. And anybody with a $400 drone can prevent an oil tanker from getting through the strait. So chaos is actually the enemy of commerce, as are, terrorist regimes. But chaos is actually even more of a threat because you cannot meaningfully negotiate with pirates, even with the Houthis. So, what was the plan? What was the plan to overthrow the government of Iran, or even attack it in a meaningful way without jeopardizing core American interests? And the answer is there never was a plan, because the people who thought this up don't care about core American interests. And the net effect is to hand the Middle East to the Chinese, which is what is in process of happening. And I hope for the sake of the United States and the world that we can stop that. But the truth is, our real allies in the region are the 6 Gulf monarchies that control a lot of the world's energy. And by the way, they're pro-American and decent people, as you know, because you and I had lunch there. This is a nice part of the world. It's being destroyed. Yeah, these are our allies. We have bases in these countries for a reason, not just to protect Israel, but to protect the Straits of Hormuz. We haven't been able to defend these countries to the extent that I think they thought we would be able to. We've moved a lot of the anti-missile defense that might have protected them to Israel. And so for them, at the end of all of this, the question is going to be, do we allow the Americans to come back and occupy bases on the Persian Gulf? What's in it for us? We just got bombed for it. No one protected us. Our energy infrastructure is damaged. Our economy is offline for months as we rebuild it. In the case of Dubai, it's a branding disaster. There's no upside. And so at that point, the Chinese, the world's largest economy, kind of sat this out on the sidelines, said basically nothing, maybe called on to negotiate some kind of peaceful resolution to this. The Chinese, not the U.S., the Chinese. And then it naturally follows that China, which is the largest trading partner of every country on both sides of the Persian Gulf, would become the dominant power in the Persian Gulf. It would become Chinese. So, if you thought about this for 2 minutes before advocating for it, you might arrive at that conclusion, or at least conclude that's possible. That could happen if killing an 86-year-old religious leader didn't cause a spontaneous creation of a pro-Western government, which was apparently Ted Cruz's plan. If that didn't work, what would happen? Well, China would take over. And so anyone who didn't think that through is either not qualified to lead anything, including one half of the state of Texas. That person is probably actively working against America's core long-term interests. I mean, I don't know what other conclusion to reach.
It's been reported that you described the attacks when they first happened as evil and dangerous. Is that true? And is that a reflection of how you felt in that moment when you heard it had finally happened?
I got a text from someone I've known for many years right when I woke up and said, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Evil and disgusting." actually, is what I said. And I wrote it to John Karl, as a reporter at ABC News, who I've known since the early 90s. I had no idea this was some kind of on-the-record thing. He immediately went on breaking news and, and reported that. I had no desire to get that out there. I want to present my views in a more cogent, thoughtful way than just growling right when I wake up in response to the news on my phone. But yes, I'm not running away from what I said. That was my initial reaction. I thought this was a disaster for American interests. I've thought that for many years. I've advocated against this war. I advocated against a war in Iran with Trump in the first Trump administration. So this is not a new position for me. I don't want to be vindicated in my fears, but unfortunately, I think the very few people who publicly oppose this are being vindicated because I don't know what the case is that this is good for the United States. No one's even attempting to make that case. So instead they say, well, you hate Jews, to which I always say, well, not only do I not hate Jews, I think anti-Semitism is immoral. It's against my religion. Shut up, you hate Jews. And that is designed to do a bunch of different things, create more loyalty to Israel. There's so much anti-Semitism, you must be loyal to Israel. That's definitely one of the aims of this. Another is to imperil the person you're calling a Nazi because Nazis get shot. Everyone knows that. And the third is to make people who disagree with you or who platform those who might disagree with you, or Bibi Netanyahu, censor them, take them off the air, shut them up, silence them. Those are the points of it. But at no juncture have I ever met anybody who has laid out like a kind of reasonable, even slightly fantastical, but just like logical case for how this war will benefit the United States, make us stronger, safer, richer. I've never heard that case. I'm waiting for it. I would love to hear it. I'd love to believe it.
You were in the Oval Office with President Trump. You were photographed with him. You met him, I think, maybe 3 times in the months leading up to this war. And I presume you discussed the potential for war in Iran with him. Did you try and persuade him that this would be a terrible idea?
Of course, that's why I went 3 times in a month, 5 weeks maybe. Yeah, that's why I went. And I've known him a long time, as you have, and always gotten along with him, still get along with him. I still like him. I'll always like him no matter what happens, just because I like him as a guy. And I think he's trying his best. But in this case, I couldn't have an effect. I tried sincerely. I wasn't getting paid for it. It's coming, of course, at some reputational cost. No one wants to deal with being called a Nazi, screamed at, or threatened, or having your kids threatened, which has happened to me a lot. And no one wants to deal with that. But I just felt that this was so serious that it was worth doing whatever I could because, my gosh, people could die. The balance of power globally could change. I've never supported the idea of an American empire, but we have one. And it's in retreat, but there's a way to manage that that's not damaging or profoundly damaging to the United States, the country that I actually live in, that I was born in. And this is not the way. Wars accelerate trends in progress. They bring massive and unexpected change. Every war does this. It's the nature of war. The second people start dying, all kinds of things you never anticipated will happen. And you can't control them. You lose control of the process. I've covered wars. I've certainly watched a lot, read about a lot. I'm not an expert, but I try to apply obvious lessons through history to present day realities. And that was the first thing I said to the president and anyone else who would listen. Once this starts, the world is going to find out exactly how strong we are, which is not something you necessarily want to reveal. An implied threat is much more effective. In other words, if we're squaring off for a fight and you look huge, you've been lifting a lot, I'm afraid of you, but I don't really know what you're capable of until I hit you or you hit me. And then we find out, and maybe it turns out you have no heart, and you lose. I mean, war is kind of the great reveal, and you don't necessarily want to go there, especially if you've ruled the world without question for 80 years, and your capabilities have never really been tested. You haven't fought a big country really since 1953 when the Chinese entered the Korean War. So you don't really know what you're capable of, and you don't really want to find out. Let's not find out. How's that? But I lost. So as you can see.
Did you, when you were talking to him, Tucker, did you get a sense that he was on the fence about it, that he was potentially persuadable, or did you feel that he was minded to do it, notwithstanding what you were trying to persuade him to the otherwise?
Well, this was over the course of a month, and that included. So I went there three times, but I, also talked by phone a bunch, and with him about this, and a lot of other people did too. To advocate for it. A lot of people. I don't think many people within the White House were advocating for it. Is my sense. Not that I would really know. I don't work there, but my sense is there weren't a lot of cabinet secretaries saying, "Oh gosh, we got to have a war with Iran." But there were a number of people from the outside who were all sort of visible. You kind of know who they are, donors and advocates for Israel who were advocating for it. And my sense is his view started to change. Well, obviously it did because he did it. But at no point did I detect an enthusiasm for it. He didn't seem eager to do it. He didn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. That sounds fair. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want anyone to have nuclear weapons. I want Israel to have nuclear weapons. I don't want France to have nuclear weapons. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable position. But the idea that you would go into some kind of conflict that could very easily become a ground invasion, or who knows what it becomes, a nuclear exchange, who knows? He was not eager to do that from what I could tell. And again, people tailor their positions to the audience, but I talked to him a lot. And I never one time got the feeling he can't wait to do it. But I also turned out to be correct, that there was an enormous amount of pressure on him, enormous. I mean, clearly there was an enormous amount of pressure. Where exactly did it come from? It wasn't just from Mark Thiessen of the Washington Post, who was calling a lot to demand more killing. Mark has a lifelong track record of doing that. But no one cares what Mark Thiessen thinks. I felt strongly, and I feel strongly now, that there were forces that were forcing him in this direction. And in fact, the Secretary of State, as you said in your intro, admitted as much out loud and said, Netanyahu said, we're going to go first, and you can either, watch your assets get destroyed and your people get killed in the Middle East, or you can join us. The question, though, is why at that point?
I thought that was really, I think, a fascinating moment when Marco Rubio said that, because it prompted Antony Blinken, the former Secretary of State, who'd obviously done his job, to then reveal that Netanyahu had tried to pressurize both Biden and Obama into doing the same thing, using the same pretext of, we're going to go and do this anyway, are you with us or not? And of course, in both those eventualities, the answer was no, and Israel didn't attack. I mean, do you think, knowing that from Blinken, do you think Trump may have got played here by Netanyahu?
Well, I already knew that the Israelis had done that in the previous administration. I knew they did it in 1973 with the Nixon administration, where they threatened to use nuclear weapons against the Arabs and forced Henry Kissinger to okay arms sales to Israel. So there's a long pattern of this. And I think anyone who knows anything about the Israelis knows that they're capable of this. They're capable of great violence. They take their threats very seriously, maybe too seriously, to the point where they become self-fulfilling. I mean, you could argue about it, but they don't mess around. And of course, this had already happened in this administration. In June, our bombing, the 12-day war in Iran, began when the Prime Minister of Israel announced to the administration, I'm doing this week. And my question then, and I raised it, was, how about no? How about no? You're a client state. You've got 9 million people. You're the size of New Jersey. You don't make operational decisions. And you certainly don't tell the world's dominant superpower what we're doing next. Why would you? That's like getting a lecture from your children. No. And that was my position, because that seems consistent with the laws of nature. The weaker partner doesn't get to dictate terms. What world are we living in? And whatever, I'm not in charge. But that was my position. I think that'd be the position of most rational people. But Israel was in charge of that war. They started it, and they were in charge of this war. They started it. So this is a difficult thing for the people who advocated for the war to deal with, because their whole purpose is not to help the United States. It's to, and not even to help Israel. It's to help the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. If you're loyal to Israel, if you love the state of Israel, what do you think about what's happening in Tel Aviv and Haifa right now? They just had, apparently, an Iranian rocket land right next to the Church of the Nativity. Luckily, it didn't do much damage. But this isn't helping Israel. There's no real end game for Israel here that's going to result in its long-term stability and peace. Of course not. This is a disaster for Israel, actually. Not that I really care, because I'm not Israeli, but I don't want to see any country harmed. And these people are in a very tough spot because now we've left the rhetoric stage and we're in the kinetic action stage where the rest of us can just assess outcomes without mediation. Like, who controls the Straits of Hormuz in 3 years? Is there an American military base in Bahrain? What happened to the Fifth Fleet? It used to be there.